In this lesson, we are going to use one of Dreamweaver's built-in templates, foundational CSS templates, to give us a jump start on our project. The website that we've been working on, our Big City Pet Sitters website, was actually created from one of these. These guys are a great way to get any project started if you don't want to build anything from scratch, which you probably will sooner or later, but just to get our feet wet, let's take a look at some of the Dreamweaver templates. We'll also learn how to customize the templates, we'll learn how to use external styles, and also we'll learn how to create pages in your site. Let's start by looking in the Files panel. In the Files panel, we are going to need to create a new folder. So right here in this top level directory, I'm going to right click and choose New Folder. I want to create our template in this folder, so I'll just name this folder Demo and click Enter. So now we have a new folder, and now we can create a page using our template, and that template is also going to have a CSS, and this is where we're going to put it. Okay, let's go to the File menu and choose New, File and New. You're going to want to make sure that Blank Page in HTML is selected, and then instead of choosing None, which is a blank web page, you're going to look at some of the different layouts. Think of these as foundational templates. You don't get any graphics, or you also don't have any, really pretty styles attached. You have some, but what you do get is the foundation. Just like if you're building your house, right? You're going to need to build a foundation before you can paint the walls. And that's the way I think about these guys. These are just layouts, bare bones layouts. Now, some of these guys, you're going to see a % sign and a little swirly line there. And some of these, for example, this 2-column fixed right bar, and also the 2-column liquid, that one has the percentage. But as you notice, some of these are different. The one I want us to look at is the 2-column fixed left bar, header, and footer, fixed layout. And with a fixed layout, you'll see a little lock icon. Fixed layouts have been a standard for a really long time, and it's a great tool for learning the foundations of web design. However, as web design evolves into the mobile world, you are going to hear a lot more about liquid layouts and responsive web design and all kinds of other cool things that are going to be a very driving force as HTML5 and CSS3 are fully adopted. We're not quite there yet. You will see some of that out on the web, but for learning Dreamweaver and getting your feet wet, the fixed width layouts are probably the best way to actually learn before you jump too deep into fluid grids and flexible layouts. But you will notice that there's an option for fluid grid layouts here that's new with CS6. All right, but for now, let's continue our learning with one of these. I think they're a little bit easier to learn, especially at first. And right down here, Dreamweaver is going to ask us, well, you're going to have a CSS file in addition to your HTML file. What would you like to do with that? Your choices are to take that CSS and put it in the head tag, which means that the CSS would be available for that document only. That's not too great usually. Typically you want it in its own file, because if your site's 100 pages, it might be nice to have your CSS attached to all 100 pages, so all of your H1s on all 100 pages look the same. Added to a head tag means that they're available in that document only. So let's create a new file right here for our CSS, and let's click Create. Now when we do this, Dreamweaver is going to ask us, where do you want to put this CSS style sheet that is given this default name? Well, we want to put it in our demo folder that we just created. And why don't we give it a different file name also? Why don't we just name it Big City? Big City. Now I don't use spaces, or I don't use uppercase in file names in web development, so you'll notice that everything's lowercase, and we are going to click Save. Now when you look over in the Files panel, what you're going to see is the .css, the cascading style sheet that accompanies this unsaved web page. Now mine says untitled9.xhtml, and by the way, xhtml is just the latest version of HTML until HTML5 is widely supported. So if yours says something different, that's perfectly okay. It just means that we need to save our web page, our CSS page. We just did that, right? But now we have this web page that we need to save as well. So let's do that. Let's go to the File menu and go down to Save As. And we'll put this guy in the demo folder, and let's name this guy Index. Index is typically reserved for the homepage of your website, but it's a good idea to have an index page or a page named index in all of your folders as well. So if somebody's directory browsing, they don't get the page not found, the 404 error message, or even worse, they don't get to directory browse depending on how your server's set up. So in other words, if I went to bigcitypetsitters.com and just typed in demo, if there wasn't an index page there, I could get 404 not found, or I could get a list of all the files on my server. It just depends. So the index.html page will prevent that. All right, so now we have a saved page. Now this may look familiar because this is exactly where our other design came from. Let's check it out. Let's preview this guy on the browser. I'm going to click Safari to launch Safari. And indeed, a very nice layout ready for us to use without a lot of work. Perfect. A great way to get started. Let's close out of here. Now, what I want you to notice is we have an HTML page open, and everything that we create for this website is going to be right here in the Files panel. We have an index page and a CSS page that was just created from that template. The CSS style sheet right here, I'm going to just click this twisty and maybe expand this guy a little bit. These are all of the styles that came along with this template and actually dictate how this template looks. When we created this template, we said that it needed to be attached, this CSS, to this HTML page. Any attached files that you have in your page, you're going to see these little bubbles right here. You see this bigcity.css? That will allow, if you click bigcity.css, you're going to notice your code view, instead of seeing your source code, you now actually see the CSS that was created with this template. You can pop back over to your source code and see the source code for your HTML file, or if you ever need to check out the CSS, you can do that as well. Now these templates are a great learning tool because the code is documented. You see this little gray code right there? That is CSS that is actually commented out and is a wonderful resource for learning. Okay, I'm just going to pop back over to source code, and now we are going to talk about customizing your CSS. We did this a little bit in the previous video, but look here in the CSS styles panel, and here's what I want to show you. Just because you have an HTML page open doesn't mean that when you click in this box right here, the CSS styles panel, that you are modifying your HTML, because you're not. You're actually modifying the CSS. Now to show you this, I think I'm going to close all of these other pages that I had open a minute ago. A great shortcut for that is to right click on this little tab and just say close other files. Alright, so now I only have my index page open that I'm working on. Alright, very good. Well, I know that this index page is attached to this CSS style sheet. Let's look at what happens when we make a change. Let's maybe create a style for H1. You may be thinking, well, we know that this guy right here, this piece of text is in H1. We see the H1 tag wrapped around there. But what is this? It looks like maybe we already have rules set up for not only the H1 tag, but all the way through the H6 and also the P tag. What is that? Well, when you see a group of selectors like this, a list of selectors, what this means is, hey, I've got a rule for the H1 and the H2 and the H3. And typically when you see this, you probably won't see things like sizing and color too much. You're going to see generic properties that are set, like for example, padding. That gives us a little bit of padding over to the left and to the right, but not so much size and color. So these guys have a top margin of 0 and a little bit of left and right padding, okay? And that's what all these guys are going to get. But what I want to do is I want us to create a style that governs the H1 tags, how all of the H1 tags will look independent of this rule here. Let's go down to the plus sign at the bottom and click one time. And remember our selector types, we briefly touched on these in the previous lesson. The one that we did talk about is the tag selector. Let's go there. The tag selector redefines any existing HTML tags. You have to use an HTML tag right here, right? So let's choose H1. We're just going to verify that this new style is being added to our attached bigcity.css. Perfect. Let's click OK. And I'll just move this guy over. And how do you want your H1s to look? There are a lot of different categories, a lot of different things that you can do in CSS, right? Let's just change maybe our font family to Georgia. Let's maybe use a font color of a dark red. And if I want to see this take effect immediately, I can click apply and I can see my H1 automatically gets these changes. Very nice. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to click OK. So in addition to the rule that was set here, we also have additional rules for our H1 tag. Let me show you that one more time. Let's go to the plus sign, and again, let's choose tag selector, and this time the tag that we want to work on is the H2 tag. So let's select it from this list, or you could type it in, click OK, and what is it that you want to do to your H2 tags? Well, maybe let's just go with a different font color, maybe blue, and click OK. And because the H2 tag was used here, it says, oh, you're an H2? Here's your rule. This guy here, oh, you're an H1, your rule is here. Now here's what I want you to notice before we finish this lesson. What just happened here? What was actually modified? Anytime that you see an asterisk next to a file name, that lets you know that there are unsaved changes. Now, where exactly do you see the asterisk? Do you see one next to the HTML? No, you don't. We actually didn't do anything to the HTML page. Anytime that you look around in the CSS Styles panel and make any changes here to an attached style sheet, what you're really doing is you are affecting the style sheet and not the HTML. Again, we just worked with presentational aspects, not HTML. That's why we see the little asterisk here. I'm going to right-click on this little bubble and say Open as a separate file. Here's a big preview of all of the styles that are being used. I see the asterisk because, again, we made changes here. This is the page we need to save, and let's do that. Let's go to File and Save, Command S or Control S, of course I could use that. Let's go back over to the index page, and now we've seen a great way to jumpstart our project using a Dreamweaver template.